we'll gather at the river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God.
In much the same way a river meanders and winds its way to the sea, a strong family will find ways to flourish, to navigate life, and to build important traditions that can be passed on down through the generations. In North Dakota, the Missouri River is front and center. For many who've settled along its banks, the river has been a teacher, imparting valuable lessons. Lessons about life, about nature, about cultures and character. Washburn is a river town, and just as the Missouri is important to Washburn, prominent citizens and families can be just as important. If you have ties to Washburn, it's a safe bet you know the Beeks family. Their roots in the community run deep. You might say in their case, the river, the community, and a solid upbringing combine to produce a remarkable result. Anyone in town will tell you these folks genuinely care about their community, their work, and in the case of this family, aviation. In March of 2021, Bill Beeks was posthumously inducted into the North Dakota Aviation Hall of Fame. Today, through this video, we'll honor Bill's father, who was inducted into the Hall in 2005. This is a look back at the life and career of Clifford Beeks, Hall of Fame aviator and architect of an amazing family tradition. Down along the winding Missouri at Washburn, Cliff Beeks was born in 1914. His father was a riverboat worker, a fact that might shed a little light on why the river was always such a big part of Cliff's life and his character. Those who knew him will tell you, he was well-versed in river lore, and throughout his lifetime he took great delight in sharing stories relating to the river and the life lessons he learned from it. Usually, this was done while he was touring with family and friends in his airplane.
Grandpa was a patriot. He was, passionate about the things that he believed in. And so, flying with Grandpa was a classroom in itself.
It was just something that fascinated my dad. He was a guy that he'd love to fly.
As Cliff grew to manhood, the fact that he was learning his life lessons well became quite apparent. His love for aviation was also budding, and this path would lead him to a stint in the Army Air Corps during World War II. The concept and ideals of this kind of service was very important to him.
Cliff Beeks, signed up for World War II with a family. Because aviation was something he believed in America, and fighting for his country was something he believed in. And it's just kind of in your blood.
Cliff returned home from the service in 1944, and life with his wife and 4 boys was ready for full speed ahead. He earned his commercial pilot's license, and Central Flying Service was born.
The first 4 or 5 years, flew out of a farmer's pasture there, just at the edge of Washburn. About 1951, we moved the whole operation out to the present airport, which had been there all the time. It was a CAA emergency airport.
In the early days, the services his new business offered leaned heavily toward flight instruction and air taxi services. Now, we all know that in North Dakota, the weather can turn on a dime, and Cliff was a pioneer in making sure snowbound families got what they needed during brutal stretches of North Dakota winters.
We had so much snow one winter, and he delivered mail by air to the farmers, groceries to the farmers, things like that. And that was, I suppose, all volunteer work.
Along with all of the more traditional things this business offered, there was one service you don't see every day: aerial fox and coyote hunting.
In the early days, they made a pretty good living doing it in the 40s. Because in those days, a coyote brought a $5 bounty and a fox brought a $3 bounty. And a fox fur was worth $5 and a coyote fur was worth $3. So they got $8 for every one, and they could go out and shoot quite a few in a day. And at $8, that was a lot of money in those days.
In good times, the pelt prices were a nice bonus, and the hunters learned some functional tips along the way.
They learned not to throw the carcasses behind the seat, because as they warmed up in the sun, the fleas would jump and end up in your neck.
In later years, aerial hunting was an effective means of control when rabies outbreaks spread through the coyote population. Eventually, Cliff was hired by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to fly gunners in an effort to help control predators that were a threat to livestock. The silver lining here, Cliff got to feed his passion for hunting, and he had a great reason to get a new airplane.
Dad just loved to hunt. In 1977, he bought a brand new Super Cub just for hunting because he had to have the radios and stuff that the government required for the contract. And so he went and bought a brand new Super Cub so he could just go hunting.
As the years went by and the business grew, so did the Beeks family. Not only physically, but in character. The Beeks boys had the good fortune of spending many of their days with their dad at the airport. As you might imagine, this time was priceless for all involved.
I don't think Cliff had to work real hard to get his boys interested in flying. It was just probably inherited from Dad.
I hung around the airport, and Bill hung around the airport from day one. I was hanging around out there. I fell off the hangar when I was 7 years old and broke my arm. We were out there pushing airplanes and cranking airplanes and getting in the way.
Central Flying Service eventually evolved into the go-to ag service for the Washburn area. The chemical application business became the bread and butter of the company. But even with a thriving business, it was important to take an entrepreneurial approach to support and balance their efforts.
One of the things I do remember, about him was just his absolute industriousness. When you think of all of the different things that he did in terms of building a career and supporting his family, all of these little things that he found, to make his way.
As with any business or career, a lot of elements need to come together to result in success.
He was a very careful pilot, I'll have to say that.
In the aviation business, one element that rises to a higher level of importance is the concept of safety and what to do when trouble crops up. Cliff's friend Tom Merkel recounts a time the two of them flew to the Twin Cities. The return trip proved to be one he will not forget.
On the way back from Minneapolis, we run into Jamestown was all fogged in. And Cliff knew what to do. We took the railroad track up to Carrington and followed the railroad track back to Nair.
Life for Cliff Beeks was a full one. Along with cultivating a successful business, Cliff was very active in his community and in politics. He was a charter member of the North Dakota Aviation Operators Association, and he was an effective lobbyist for agricultural interests in Bismarck, another ability he passed on to his son Bill. Cliff was a contributor to the series of events that led to the formation of what is now the FAA, and he was the first World War II veteran to be named commander of the Victor B. Wallen American Legion Post in Washburn. He was a successful fundraiser and active in the community and civic clubs, and the list goes on. By now, it should be clear that people know exactly why a guy like Cliff Beeks is in the Aviation Hall of Fame. He earned it. He did this by living a life dedicated to the industry, his family, his community, and his state. And he did it through the advancement of everything that aviation has to offer. Cliff Beeks was a positive influence on so many, and his contributions live on through everyone his life and legacy have touched. And about the notion of a family tradition? Granddaughter Laura sums it up best.
There's a legacy to it as well, which, makes me very proud to see, that my grandfather is in the Hall of Fame. And now I'm very, very proud.
So once again, through this video, we salute Cliff Beeks for his 2005 induction into the North Dakota Aviation Hall of Fame. And we congratulate the entire Beeks family on their outstanding story. A remarkable story of family tradition.